Can the U.S. presidency be stolen by remotely hacked voting machines? My guest today is Dr. John Warner of Argonne National Labs, who thinks that's a definite maybe. Hi everyone, and welcome to the first voyage of our new studio. This is the first time that we've actually tried pulling all the pieces together, so it should be interesting. As I mentioned, I'm joined by John Warner. There you are, John. Hey, John.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about voting machines. John's been very, very patient with me as I've tried to work out the various parts of the studio and make sure it all works together. And it should be a very interesting and fun conversation. But if you do see me looking down or looking baffled, it's because I'm learning new buttons in the process of this. Anyway, John has been working on a voting machine issue that is absolutely fascinating and somewhat terrifying. John, why don't you tell us about what you've been exploring?
Well, we've been looking into voting machines and how to hack them. Now, what's a little different about our approach is a lot of work has been done in hacking voting machines. For example, some Princeton folks did a great job with cyber hacks, and so did Michigan. There's a team at Michigan that also did some great work with cyber attacks. However, we did a physical attack, and that's how we are approaching things, from a physical point of view instead of a cyber point of view.
So what exactly did you cover? What's the full scope of the risk?
Well, with a few minutes of access and the right circuitry, you can basically hijack the touchscreen from a touchscreen voting machine. Or if you don't have a touchscreen, you can hijack the buttons in other voting machines that use buttons and intercept the communication between the button or touchscreen and the CPU. And once you have control of the communication stream, you can now inject your own communications if you want to, or you could just let the original communications go through.
So how does this, no, it's not going to actually ask me, so let's go back here. How does this actually pertain to like the other voting machine scandals that we've seen in previous years? You know, we've heard a number of other voting machine problems. Is this a new thing? Is this just a new mechanical issue, or what's the scope of the overall voting machine risk that we're facing?
Well, the old cyber ones are most definitely still there, but our work didn't involve any firmware or reverse engineering of the code, or even writing code for that matter. Again, our attack is just a physical attack where we hijack the touchscreen, and if we don't like what the user is inputting, well, we'll just change that.
So what is the full scope of this risk? What are we dealing with here?
Well, you can, once you hijack the input on a voting machine, you can change an election if you have enough machines covered. Or if it's a small election, just one or two machines can compromise the integrity of the election.
Which is deeply scary. For a sec here, and I'm going to ask you really to tell us about Argonne National Labs. It was part of the Manhattan Project at one point, wasn't it? What goes on there now?
Well, that's correct. It was actually the first national laboratory. It all started back in the 40s when Enrico Fermi built a nuclear reactor under the squash court of the University of Chicago. Well, they figured it was probably a good idea to move the nuclear reactor away from a large metropolitan downtown area.
Yeah, I'll bet.
And they found the home here. This used to be a long ways away from Chicago. Now we're just a suburb. They do a lot of very interesting work here in supercomputing, electric vehicle research, and efficiency research. They do nanoscale research. It runs the gamut of the different types of research that's done here. I think there are about 3,000 people doing research in a variety of different areas.
Okay, for those of you wondering what's going on, this is called New Guy in Studio. And learning how to push random buttons. As you can tell, I am not a broadcaster by nature. I'm a scientist, and so running all the little broadcasty things is kind of getting in the way of things. But we do have the rest of a very interesting interview, so I'm going to continue this with John. John, what's your background there at Argonne?
Well, I'm a physicist by training, and when I was... Do you mind if I go a little further back than just Argonne?
Oh, please. Tell us about yourself.
When I was in graduate school, I was a little scared that I'd be having to say, "Would you like fries with that, sir?" when I graduated. I didn't know what I wanted to do, of course. And I saw this job ad at Los Alamos National Laboratory for security research. Well, I'm thinking to myself, security research, that's weird. I mean, hasn't security been figured out thousands of years ago? Well, I applied, and I ended up getting the job. And, well, it's all about our research is we break into things so we can figure out where the solutions are.
That's neat.
And we eventually moved from Los Alamos to Argonne National Laboratory. Totally different culture, let me tell you. It's amazing the differences. But so that's what I do here. My full-time job is with the vulnerability assessment team. We really break into real security systems. Not that voting machines are a real security system, but they should have more security than they do have.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, we're going to try another switch here. Let's see if we don't break it. There we go. Let's just stay there for a second. Lesson, by the way, for those of you who are running in a studio for the first time is don't push the buttons too often. Otherwise, they get a little carried away. We're going to stay on this screen for a few minutes, and I'll talk to John this way, and then we'll move around. So you mentioned that the culture between the different labs was quite different. Now that's something I find kind of surprising. I would think that one federal science lab and another federal science lab had pretty much a similar culture.
Oh, you'd be very surprised. Los Alamos is a nuclear weapons laboratory. Everything's real sort of confined, hush-hush. You don't even really know what your neighbors are doing. Argonne's more of an academic institution. Walking around here is like walking around a college campus. I mean, everybody is really open. Of course, we don't share our stuff so much, so we carried some of the Los Alamos stuff over with us. But people are just genuinely very friendly here. I mean, they were friendly at Los Alamos as well. But again, this is more of a... It's a lot like a college campus here compared to Los Alamos.
Cool. Well, let's get back to the voting machine. At one point, you talked about that these machines could be compromised by a man-in-the-middle attack. How does man-in-the-middle apply to voting machines?
Well, the man-in-the-middle is one of my favorite attacks. And what it does is you take one component, which communicates to another component. In this case, it's the touch screen, which communicates to a CPU. Okay? So the touch screen's a module. The CPU is another module, if you want to think about it like that. And in order to communicate from one to the other, you need to do that through wires or something. Well, with the man-in-the-middle, you build some circuitry to tap into those wires. And now you can listen in on the signals going from the touchscreen to the CPU. If you like the signals that are going through, well, you allow them to keep traveling. If you don't like those signals, i.e. somebody voted for a candidate you don't like, well, then you just change the signals and you vote for the candidate you want.
That doesn't sound good.
Well, not if you're on the receiving end of it.
Yeah, really. So, okay, I'm confused. You had mentioned at one point that this is Diebold, and I thought Diebold became Premier Election Systems. Are you working on an older machine?
We are, yes. This was donated to us by Velvet Revolutions, and they gave us the machine. We said we'd work on it in our spare time. This is really a Saturday afternoon project. So after we put in our normal 40 hours a week, every once in a while we'd stick around and do a little extra. And, well, eventually we got the attack, and there you go. So, yes, it is a slightly older machine. However, with the man-in-the-middle, there's still that communications that's necessary to communicate between the touchscreen and the CPU. We think this attack would also work for the newer stuff as well.
So are any of the machines that you're looking at, are they still in service?
As far as I know, yes.
Really?
Yes. Including the Sequoia Advantage that we looked at, and then, of course, the Diebold TS Plus.
Wow. So now, if it was donated by Velvet Revolution, how do you know that the machine wasn't tampered with before you got it? How do you know that it was a solid, uncompromised machine to begin with?
I actually don't. Normally, when I play the part of a bad guy, I make up all the rules. I get to do any attack I want, and that includes cyber. However, in this case, I was asked by my supervisor and team leader, Roger Johnston, to not replicate anything anybody has done already. And let me tell you, that's a lot. There's a lot of hacking that's gone on with voting machines. So in order not to replicate any of that stuff, I went with the physical only approach. So we didn't reverse any firmware. I may have spotted hacking if I was able to reverse the firmware and try to find viruses and stuff like that. But I don't know that.
Interesting. Now, Velvet Revolution is the same name as a Czechoslovakian democracy group from the Czech Revolution. Is there any relationship there? I mean, that's just kind of curious.
I have no idea. That's very interesting.
Yeah, that was a piece out of history. When I heard about it, I was like, I've heard of them from history class. So it's kind of interesting. So, are Diebolds the only machines that are flawed and vulnerable in this way?
No, absolutely not. In fact, voting machines aren't the only thing that's flawed in this way. Anything where one piece of the machine communicates to another piece of the machine is potentially vulnerable to a man-in-the-middle attack.
Wow. So, can you run down just from end to end your understanding of the risks to American voting machines based on the stuff that not only you've done, but your awareness of it? Like, just itemize that. Where do we stand?
Well, it's not looking great. I can tell you that. And to tell you the truth, one of the scarier things that I have seen since this apparently broke in the news is that there is a mentality out there. It's not, I wouldn't say the mentality of every election official, but there are some out there who think, oh, well, this is just impossible. This can't occur. Well, if I was a security manager or an election official, I would want to know more. Well, what are you talking about? Can you prove it to me? How can we mitigate this so that it doesn't happen in the real world? But to just say it's impossible and stamp your foot and that's it, well, you're not going to be learning from security findings. So what I found, and what I think the team has found, is that what's the scariest of all is the lack of security culture when it comes to elections.
Yeah, I find that a lot with the culture in cybersecurity, which has been a big issue. I've actually had the heads of antivirus software companies, when I ask them questions about things, tell me you worry too much. I had a guy who runs one of the most well-known backup companies. When I asked him what happens to his hard disks if he goes out of business, tell me that I was a worrywart. It's really interesting trying to understand the security culture and getting people in the headspace that just because you're paranoid doesn't mean people aren't out to get you.
That is absolutely true. There's a quote going around that I really like. If you're complacent with your security, or if you're happy with your security, you can bet your adversaries are too.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I'm just trying to get a feel for like the scope of, and I'm coming back to this question because it's something that I'm really curious about, for the real scope of the types of attacks or risks on voting machines. Now, I know that there is the physical remote risk you talked about, and I'm still not sure why that's remotely hacked as opposed to locally. So maybe you can explain that part of it first.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, it is a local hack. There's a circuit that I have that I implant in the machine. Now, the remote control, people like remote controls. So when we demo it, we demoed with a remote control. But in real life, you just throw your circuit in. You can start the attack at, say, a preset time. Part of your circuit could be a small clock. That's easy to program in a microprocessor. So you can have the attack start at, say, 9 a.m. and end at, say, 6 p.m. You don't have to remotely turn it on or off. I mean, that's in the real world, dealing with hundreds of machines, that's just not the way to go.
Yes, you're talking about physical access to a machine. Let's talk practicality to steal an election, especially like a national election. Aren't we talking about needing to physically access a whole lot of machines to be hacked? Is that doable?
Well, that's a good question. In some elections, my boss was saying something about Senator Al Franken won by 312 votes. That's potentially one machine. So if you have close elections, you can certainly sway those. Now, do you need to, for large elections, do you need to do a whole bunch of machines? Probably. But the attack isn't really I'm one voter attacking one machine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to attack the polling place or wherever these things are stored before they go into service. So you have a warehouse where they're all stored. Who knows what that's like? I haven't seen any of the security on that myself. But then they're transported somewhere like a secondary school or a library where they sit for a few days before they're actually put in service for vote taking. Right there, I would watch that if I were a bad guy.
So if all of a sudden, let's say, for example, a precinct that is normally, let's just say, very Democratic, all of a sudden turns up an enormous amount of votes that are Republican, and it's all out of one school, wouldn't that raise red flags?
Well, yeah, but what's interesting is that with these with the electronic voting machines, really, if you go back and audit the voting machine, it's going to lie to you in the same way that it did from the original answer it gave you. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Because the votes that are recorded are what's recorded. It's not going to change. So what are you going to do? You're going to rerun the vote? I mean, I don't know what they would do in that particular case, but it certainly would look fishy.
Yeah, that brings me actually to the next question that I had written down, which is I've always been baffled that we have a system without any kind of paper backup. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, actually, a lot of places use paper ballots, and that's actually, I think, not a bad way to go. At least you know things aren't being changed on you. Is it the best security ever? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. One thing that I would really like to go after is one of those optical scanners, that reads the paper ballots. Yeah. So hopefully we can procure one of those, and we can see if this man in the middle works on that as well. But so there are paper ballots. They're also voter verified. Some voting machines will actually print a voter record of what the voter voted. Now, okay, in this situation, you've got a voter coming in. He's touching his touch screen, and then he basically sees a receipt that he cannot have of what he voted on. Well, my attack deals with that as well, and we do a man in the middle between the voting machine and the printer. So we'll tell the printer to print what the voter originally voted for. Meanwhile, the CPU is still electronically recording our misvote.
Oh, man, I'm not going to sleep at night. So you're actually actively looking for additional voting machines to tinker with?
Yes. Well, although we have limited space, so...
Do you want if our readers have access one that they might be able to provide, do you want them to contact you?
Contacting us would be great.
All right, I'm gonna shoot up your. I'm gonna see if I can. There we go. Okay, that's your website. Do you want to give them an email or a subdomain that they can look at to find you, to contact you if they have something that they want to donate?
Yeah, our website, there's actually a VAT somewhere in there. If you do a Google search on Argonne National Lab and Vulnerability Assessment Team, it should be the first page.
Cool. And my request, I'm going to switch back here because, there we go. My request to our readers is our listeners is really important. This is like the important thing when you start talking about voting things. It's the integrity of the American system is essentially dependent on voting. I mean, we always have the issue of whether or not our people vote for people you agree with. That we have that right to make that decision, but we don't have the right to have somebody just sneak in there and screw with our votes. So it's really important to be able to do that. And if you do know anybody who can help John, or you have access to these machines that he can do some of his testing on, it's just really essentially important that you get a hold of him or get a hold of me, and we'll see if we can get one of these in John's hands and he can scare us in other ways. So let me go back to vulnerabilities in other areas. You're part of the government. Can't you fix this thing? What kind of rank idiocy is it that that's keeping our government from solving this thing now?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's not the government there isn't one body that I know of in charge of elections. They're just little precincts all over the place. Hundreds, thousands of them. It's amazing. And they stovepipe up into the state level, but I don't know of I don't know of a federal level election body. There probably is one. I just don't know about it.
Well, there's the Federal Election Commission.
Well, there you go. But you got to get people interested in the message first. The first message is, well, election integrity is important, and there are problems. There are holes that you could poke in the integrity of elections. You got to get them past the, well, that's impossible stage.
Yeah, so to add that to that, is that impossible? John, are we screwed? You know, can we trust our election results?
Um, I don't know, quite honestly. Because of the work that I do, I'm sort of paranoid about everything. So me being paranoid about this is just one more layer on that cake.
Wow. Well, wow, not good. So what else are you paranoid about?
Oh boy. Well, you've heard of ATM skimmers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, paranoid about those. Check the ATM every time I go to use one. You wiggle the little thing where my card goes in to see if they're, break free or anything. There's also a man-in-the-middle attack on gas pumps between the credit card reader and the actual inside of the pump. And what that's for is for skimming your credit card number. So I'm totally paranoid about that. Paranoid about identity theft. Paranoid about people breaking into things that I happen to own. Yeah.
So for anybody who thinks that I'm paranoid, John is too. There's at least one other person who's as crazy as I am about some of these things, but they're real. I mean, this stuff is very, very scary, and the same is true with cyber attacks and botnet attacks and so forth. Before we wrap this up, John, is there anything else that you want to say to the ZDNet audience and share with them about this or about what you're doing?
You know, no, actually I don't. I was just going to say back to another question, is that it would be extremely nice if the government would pony up some funding. There's no funding. I mean, not necessarily that we need funding, but it would be nice that they looked into this with some money backing. I know this isn't the economy for that, but I would think election integrity is something that they might want to at least investigate.
They're not funding election integrity investigations at all?
Not Well, states probably are with the red teaming exercises, but as far as I know, I mean, this was a Saturday afternoon project, totally unfunded. Like I said, the machines that we have were donated to us. As far as I know, the Princeton and Michigan groups were not funded for their work, so I don't know. Maybe we're just...
And you're volunteering your time for this too.
Absolutely.
So let's be clear on this, people out there. For those of you who think that government employees are not going out of their way for the benefit of Americans, here's one, and I'm assuming most of your team have been doing the same thing, going out of their way, taking their personal time to try to do something to protect Americans and the integrity of the American system. That is awesome, dude. That's awesome.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Then thank you. On that, I'm going to wrap it and say thank you to, I'm going to actually try to make this work. There we go. And I'm going to say thank you to everybody who's listened, and especially thanks to Dr. John Warner of Argonne National Labs. This has been a presentation of ZDNet Government, and listen to what we've just learned out of this. A couple things. One, we are clearly at risk in terms of voting integrity. Two, it does not appear that there's that much funding involved in investigating voting integrity. And three, let's be thankful to those American public servants and towering experts in their field who are donating their time when they could be doing other things, trying to keep our elections safe. Thank you very much. My name is David Gewirtz, ZDNet Government. Have yourself a great day, and I'm about to figure out how to close the credits. And there we go.